Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on the role and future of digital economy agreements in developing Asia. My name is Pramila Crivelli, and I will be moderating today's session together with my colleague, Rolando Avendano. Thank you for joining us, and let's get started. It's my great pleasure to welcome Bruce Gosper, Vice President for Administration and Corporate Management of the Asian Development Bank, who will deliver the opening remarks. Thank you, VP Gosper, for joining us today, and over to you.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today's Asian Impact webinar. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this event, where we're introducing ADB's publication on the role and future of digital economy agreements in developing Asia. In recent years, we have seen digital transformation reshape how economies function, how businesses operate, and how people connect. For Asia and the Pacific, this transformation has been especially fast-moving, creating both incredible opportunities and urgent policy challenges. Digital economy agreements have become one of the key instruments for managing this change. These agreements are at the frontier of modern trade policy, helping countries navigate increasingly important areas for digital trade, from cross-border data flows to cybersecurity, digital standards, and other emerging areas. Yet, many developing economies still face practical barriers, legal, institutional, and technical, in putting these rules into action and fully realizing their potential. This new volume builds on ADB's broader work on digital regulatory cooperation. It draws insights from ADB's efforts to better understand how digital regulations are implemented on the ground and measuring the economic impacts of digital regulatory cooperation. In line with ADB's Strategy 2030 midterm review, which underscores the importance of digital governance and cross-border connectivity, ADB is ramping up efforts to support digital cooperation at both national and regional levels. This includes providing policy advice, building regulatory capacity, and helping governments design frameworks that respond to the rapid evolution of digital technologies while reducing risks and fragmentation. ADB is also a founding member of the Digital Standards Initiative, which promotes the adoption of globally harmonized standards to reduce trade frictions and build trust in digital transactions. The recent progress in WTO e-commerce negotiations further highlights the urgency of building interoperable digital systems. As Asia and the Pacific continue to lead global e-commerce growth, regional cooperation on digital standards and rules will be key to ensuring that benefits reach businesses and consumers across the region. Understanding the role and potential contributions of digital economy agreements to our region is not only timely but urgent. This involves, as the volume intends, a wide range of topics, from digital economy partnership agreement provisions and digital standards to cross-border payments and digital taxation, always with a focus on real-world applications and policy relevance. It's also important to keep in mind that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. Countries across Asia and the Pacific are at very different stages of digital development, but there is still great value in learning from each other and working towards more harmonized and inclusive digital rules. Looking ahead, we believe that the potential of digital economy agreements goes far beyond trade. It is already impacting patterns of consumption, service delivery, and financial inclusion. They can play an important role in unlocking innovation, supporting more resilient economies, and connecting people across borders in new and meaningful ways. In this discussion, we should not ignore the broader global context. Recent measures and rising geopolitical tensions among major economies are putting international trade relations under renewed strain. Long-standing frameworks are being revisited, and the rules underpinning global commerce are being tested. Against this backdrop, the issues covered in today's discussions take on particular significance. While broader trade relations face increasing risks, the flexibility and adaptability of digital trade offer a potential pathway to maintain regional economic cooperation. Identifying ways forward to deepen digital trade and regulatory collaboration, even in times of uncertainty, could help preserve openness and avoid the risks of growing fragmentation. The volume we are launching today provides a timely contribution, offering grounded analysis and practical insights to support more resilient and inclusive digital economies. I do hope that today's discussion can spark new ideas and collaborations. I would like to thank the authors, editors, and contributors for the hard work that went into this volume. And now let's hear more from the experts and the practitioners who helped shape this important publication. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, VP Gosper, for your insightful remarks. We truly appreciate your leadership on this important topic and also your continuous support in producing the publication, and we have the pleasure to launch today. So without further ado, let me now start our presentation of this edited volume entitled, just like the webinar, The Role and Future of Digital Economy Agreements in Developing Asia. The publication is available online with the link or QR code that is displayed on screen. I will first share with you the context and main objectives of the publication, and then Rolando and I will take you through some key issues and policy recommendations. So this volume explores how digital economy agreements, or DEAs, are shaping the region's digital trade framework. While developed countries have advanced in integrating digital provisions, many developing economies still face regulatory fragmentation. And the growing adoption of DEAs and the dominance of certain economies in the adoption of these agreements is reflected in the figure on the right, where you can see different countries and the date of entry into force of different agreements. This volume links the chapters through a common theme, which is the DEA. So we cover different topics, such as data flow, cybersecurity, privacy, taxation, digital payments, and each chapter presents insights into this area and offers policy recommendations to foster regulatory cooperation and enhance participation in the global economy. In a broader context, this volume is a first step towards further research to bridge the gap between the content of DEAs and the analysis we are conducting in this edited volume, but also with their practical applications, which is a focus in our ongoing project in ADB, looking at practical applications. Okay, next slide. Next. Okay. The volume is divided into 5 chapters, each focusing on key aspects of digital economy agreements. These chapters are authored by experts in the field, and each one provides critical insight and recommendations. So chapter 1 is written by Stephanie Honey. We have the pleasure to have her with us today. It explores trends in domestic and international digital regulations. Then chapter 2 is authored by Henry Gao and analyzes the DEPA, the Digital Economy Partnership Agreement, provisions on data flows, cybersecurity, and privacy, and discuss their implications for developing countries. Chapter 3 is drafted by Yo-Yoon Kwak and Enjing Lee, and it examines the role of international digital trade standards. Chapter 4 is written by Martin Chorzempa, who is also here with us today, and addresses the challenges in cross-border payment and explores policy options to improve financial inclusion. And last but not least, the chapter 5, authored by Julian Chase, investigates the implications and challenges of implementing digital tax reforms in Asia and the Pacific. All right, next slide. I'll provide now key highlights of each chapters, but that are not exhaustive, but just should give you a sense of the depth of the analysis. and give you a flavor of the value. So chapter 1 maps recent developments and highlights the growing heterogeneity in national and digital policies. One key issue in this chapter is the restrictiveness of data policies, such as data localization and restrictions on cross-border data flows. These increase trade costs, and particularly for MSMEs, which depend on efficient digital markets. The graph on the right shows the importance of enforcing these provisions, as it shows that not all provisions are legally binding, which means there might be some ambiguity in how to implement. Now, another challenge is the low participation of developing countries in modern digital trade agreements, as shown also in the previous slides. This limits the influence of developing economies on global standards and also the benefits they can derive from these agreements. So the chapter concludes with recommendations to develop foundational digital rules, integrate them into trade frameworks, and emphasize interoperability through frameworks like the DEPA, which allows countries to adopt provisions based on their needs. Next. Okay. So chapter 2 is on DEPA specifically, so I just mentioned it. It explores how these digital economy partnership agreements between Singapore, New Zealand, and Chile, originally and now also with Korea, addresses the key challenges in data flow, cybersecurity, and privacy. And this with a particular focus on understanding how it can help developing countries. It offers recommendations for strengthening cybersecurity laws and aligning privacy standards with international norms while leveraging DEPA's modular approach to bridge regulatory gaps. Now, more specifically, DEPA encourages selective participation. This allows countries to adopt only the provision that align with their domestic digital economy goals and capacities. And this flexibility ensures that nations can gradually integrate into the global digital economy at their own pace. And this is one of the very, very important provision of or feature of DEPA. DEPA also builds flexibility into the legal framework and enabling countries to adjust and amend their commitments as their regulatory capabilities evolve. Now, finally, DEPA facilitates regulatory cooperation, creating platforms for countries to work together on the common challenges, such as data protection and cybersecurity, while also respecting national sovereignty and domestic legal requirements. Next slide.
Thank you, Pramila. I'll continue. In chapter 3, Yoonee Kwak and Ji-Hin Lee examine the role of digital trade standards and propose ways to strengthen regional cooperation in setting those standards. The term digital standards includes the standardization of digital and emerging technologies. In the context of this work, it refers to digital documentation accompanying goods traded across borders and related provisions. The chapter explores first digital standards on existing agreements, such as DEPA and the Australia-Singapore Digital Economy Agreement. It then discusses efforts to set AI and 5G telecommunication standards by looking at standard-related provisions in these agreements. The chapter provides insights on ongoing and future interventions, such as embedding digital standards into trade agreements, including rules on data flows, authentication, and digital ID, promoting modular and flexible agreement structures to allow scalable participation, and encouraging cross-sector coordination between public regulators, private sector, including the Digital Standards Initiative that was mentioned, and global standard setting bodies. In his chapter on cross-border payments, Martin presents an analysis of the current state of financial inclusion in the region and the infrastructure needed for payment systems and cross-border payments. The chapter describes initiatives to build new digital payment systems aimed at interoperability as well as digital identity systems. It also emphasizes barriers that fragmentation and data localization could create for payment systems to work across borders. Finally, the chapter explores the potential of central bank digital currencies in the region. It emphasizes some key areas for policy intervention, such as strengthening digital payment infrastructure and real-time systems to lower costs, harmonizing technical standards and regulations around data sharing, anti-money laundering, and know your customer regulations to reduce frictions, and finally, support regional efforts to link payment systems and promote local currency settlements. The final chapter by Professor Julien Chess explores the interaction between international tax, trade, and investment regimes in the digital economy. The motivation behind this chapter stems from several developments, including the absence of consistent international tax rules for the digital economy, despite progress, the increase in investment treaty disputes on taxation issues, and the linkages between cross-border data flows and taxation of digital products. The chapter explores several areas for better aligning tax policies with trade and investment regimes. For example, the multilateral instrument offers a framework for addressing taxation of digital products while reducing also the risk of double taxation and preventing disputes. Second, establishing robust data privacy frameworks, which can secure personal data while also enabling its legitimate use for tax purposes. And third, improving coordination between tax and trade policies. Regional trade agreements, such as RCEP and CPTPP, provide platforms for harmonizing tax policies and enhancing cooperation among tax administrations. As a way forward and to conclude, the digital economy agreements are reshaping regional integration and bridging regulatory gaps and broadening their scope to new areas. Their full potential will depend on practical implementation and inclusive cooperation. Some questions before we move to the panel discussions are: how can our DMCs better align domestic reforms and digital trade commitments? How can digital economy agreements serve as scalable modular tools into the global digital economy? And what role should regional institutions and donors play in addressing the implementation? I now pass back the floor to Pramila to start the panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Rolando. And so now I'm pleased to introduce our esteemed panelists who will share their insights in selected areas. So first, we have Stephanie Yoonee, Managing Director of Yoonee Consulting, who will discuss Chapter 1 on digital trade trends and also answer our difficult questions. Next, we have Martin Chorzempa, who is Senior Fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics. He will present on Chapter 4 on cross-border payments and CBDCs. Then we have Yoonee Jeong, Senior Digital Technology Specialist at ADB. She will speak on the broader digital transformation priorities of ADB and its connection also to the DEAs. And finally, Amrita, National Digital Sector Expert, who will discuss Nepal's challenges in advancing its digital regulatory framework. So let me start with Stephanie. Stephanie, let me ask you a question. So your chapter provides a broad overview of evolving digital regulation landscape across Asia and the Pacific. And you clearly highlight the overlapping nature of those agreements, or what we call the noodle bowl, more traditionally in trade agreements. So what does your ideal scenario look like? What should we do? Should we aim to move towards a single streamlined visional framework? Or do you see a value in having more a pluralistic system with different agreements where they coexist and offer different advantages for different countries and sectors? So, Stephanie, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Pramila. Pardon me. And thank you so much to the Asian Development Bank for the chance to contribute to this. I think it's one of the most sort of fascinating and important areas of modern trade policy. So, I mean, to answer your question up front, I think it's just a reality that we're now living in a world of pluralistic digital trade governance. It's a fact that there is a sort of energetic set of trade negotiations, trade agreements, and regulatory approaches around the region. And as the chapter explores, that has its benefits, but also its drawbacks. And so I think it's really important to recognise that we have to start from where we are now, which is with this very diverse landscape. But I think the chapter tries to make the case quite compellingly that it's important to try to foster interoperability and coherence, if not necessarily harmonisation, as far as possible. So why is that? Well, the fact is that over the last few years, there's been quite a lot of focus on how to enable developing economies and small businesses to participate successfully in the digital economy, which of course is now really a bit of a misnomer. There's very, very few businesses that are not touched in some way by digitalization. When we talk about the digital economy, it really is the economy. So this is a cross-cutting thing that concerns every economy in the region. But what we have seen in the last few years is a real emphasis on digital infrastructure and connectivity, which is critical, on skills and literacy, which is also critical. But the area of digital regulation has really been quite underdone. But the chapter tries to make the case for the fact that this is actually critical to enabling successful participation. And when we surveyed what was out there in terms of regulatory settings, whether domestic or sort of cross-border regulation, it's very clear that there's a very heterogeneous landscape where there's some economies in the region have got very advanced, very sophisticated, and very comprehensive regulation, ranging from areas like data protection and data governance through to consumer protection, and into areas of sort of emerging technology like AI. But at the other end of the scale, we also have economies, particularly smaller and less advanced economies, that actually have very few of those even basic regulatory building blocks. So things like consumer protection or privacy regulation, or data governance, electronic transactions frameworks, some of the things that we would see as just very fundamental to enabling the digital economy to function. And that is a problem, because if we don't have those regulatory settings in place, there are two possible adverse consequences. The first is that developing economies can miss out on realising the full economic development benefits and inclusion benefits of digital economy participation. But then there's also, on the flip side of that, exposure to risks. So things like cybercrime or cybersecurity threats. If you don't have the right regulatory building blocks in place to achieve that, you're really exposing your economy and your businesses and communities to economic but other kinds of risk as well. So what the chapter sets out is a set of arguments around the need for developing countries in the region, developing Asia in particular, but also many areas in the Pacific, to essentially put in place those domestic regulatory building blocks, but also to participate in cross-border digital regulation. And the case is made for doing this through some of those innovative digital economy agreements that are the focus of this book. They have a lot of advantages for developing economies in the sense of they can give developing economies a seat at the table, and it's critical to be able to write the rules of the road for digital trade by being part of that rule-making process. But also, in and of themselves, they can help to build capacity. They can help to write agile rules which respond to a rapidly evolving technology. And they can also serve as an incubator of good ideas and creative trade policy making for some of those rapidly changing areas of the digital economy. Like AI, we would not be able to have a conversation about digital trade in 2025 without mentioning AI. Now, we do have one really important model out there, which is this new e-commerce agreement at the WTO. A stabilised text was produced back in July of last year, and I think there's a strong case for developing countries who are WTO members to participate in that. But beyond that, we can use the ability of these digital economy agreements to really boost participation. So let me wrap it up there, Pramila, but I think the takeaway is that domestic regulations are important, cross-border regulations are important, and we can have a pluralistic model, but it needs to be designed with an eye to interoperability. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. It was very insightful. I think we get really the point. Interoperability is key, inclusion is key, and mitigating also the risk for developing economies is key. And it's also very complementary to the chapter 3 of this book, where we also discuss how DEPA can help mitigate those risks. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So I will now move to Martin. And thank you, Martin, again, for your contribution. It is a very timely topic, and we are glad that it's part of the volume. Our question will be, what are, in your perspective, the main challenges for expanding cross-border payments in Asia from your analysis?
Yeah, thank you. It was fun to be part of this project, and it's good to be part of this webinar. But before I get into the questions, I just want to set the scene a little bit and connect to kind of the digital trade issue, which is, you can't really engage in trade unless, especially cross-border, if you don't have cross-border payments. So solving these problems is really fundamental to being able to achieve the goals that are, span the other chapters here. And what payments look like today? Well, one of them elements of it which makes this complicated is that payments are very complex, especially cross-border payments. You have to deal with multiple currencies, multiple regulatory regimes. And then another striking feature of the current system for making payments is that it's heavily reliant on the US dollar. It's kind of surprising to many probably that the imports and exports throughout Asia, on average, 75% of them use the US dollar. So it's heavily reliant on a currency that is not an Asian currency and is a much larger role than the trade. So what problems does that create? Well, there are two issues that I want to get into here. The first level is that anyone who doesn't have access to digital payments in their own country is not going to have an ability to access a digital cross-border payment. So usually what you need to be able to access digital payments is digital identity or some other form of documentation needed to get a bank account or a payment account. Often that's missing. And often the accounts that are offered to people are not used. So you can look at different countries in Asia and you find an interesting pattern. In some places, people don't have any accounts. In other places, they're just not using their accounts. And then the second level, if you do have an account, does your local payment institution or bank have access to dollars so you can make these kind of big, important cross-border payments if you're, say, a small merchant trying to sell and engage in cross-border trade? And one problem here is that few countries in Asia have a bank that's directly connected to the infrastructure that the US operates, where most dollars are connected. So there are 10 in Asia, but most are in the PRC or Japan. There's one Thai, one Indian. All other countries have to access this indirectly through a correspondent banking relationship, which means you have to go through a lot of different hoops before you get to the next one. Another is slow and uneven adoption of standards, and standards here are really important because the way that banks talk to each other to know and allow them to process a payment automatically without a lot of cost and delay means that all that data has to be there and easily readable. And a lot of the standards that banks are using around the world are still from the 1970s and don't include that much data. So it's not enough data to tell, is this money laundering? Is this a legitimate trade transaction? You often don't know. And linking to the trade issue, the GATS agreement, the WTO, should, in theory, help provide free access to the market for cross-border financial services. But only less than a third of the membership of the WTO has actually approved that, meaning that the rest are free to put up all sorts of barriers. So what that means is that the local institutions are not able to expand in other jurisdictions and create a big network. And the bigger the network that you're dealing with, the less different steps and cross-network payments have to go, makes it more expensive, makes it take more steps. And so both that limits the opportunities for expansion of domestic networks and also limits the ability of regular people in these countries to access the best global payment networks, in part due to protectionism. So hopefully we can find some ways around that. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. That's really insightful. So we see several challenges. Payments are complex, as you say, challenges in terms of the dominance of the US dollar, the issues on correspondence banking, which are extremely important now for some of our DMCs. And also, I like very much the intersection that you had on the cross-border financial services and the role of trading services agreement for expanding the scope of cross-border digital payments. Thank you so much.
So let me now turn to our internal expert at ADB, Yoonee Jeong. So Yoonee, ADB is stepping up its digital transformation efforts across the region. And as part of your work in the digital sector group of ADB, what are the current priorities under this program, and how do you connect this with digital economy agreements being developed or supported by ADB?
Thank you, Pramila, and thanks, Rolando. Let me first by congratulating the authors and the editors of this important publication. And it's been mentioned earlier, but from the digital sector office point of view, this publication is really timely for two basic reasons. As VP Gosper mentioned, ADB Strategy 2030 midterm review has also highlighted the importance of digital transformation, but also regional cooperation and integration and private sector development. And digital economy agreements sits at the nexus, if not at the heart of all this. Therefore, the insights that this publication brings forward is extremely important. And again, as everybody's aware, the increasing geopolitical uncertainty and the erosion or seeming erosion of the existing global trade rules makes deeper understanding of the landscape and the policy tools that DMCs have to strengthen interregional as well as intra-regional trade is, again, very timely. So we thank you. Thanks the whole author team for this important insights. So as Pramila mentioned, ADB is ramping up its digital transformation effort in a big way, and establishment of Digital Sector Office under Sector Department 2 as of February this year is a case in point. And very quickly, we're a young team, but the way we will approach our support to DMCs falls into two big buckets. One is foundational, and the other bucket is accelerators. And all the business, all the work streams under these two buckets have touch points with everything that has to do with digital trade and digital economy development. So under foundations, our focus is strengthening policy and regulatory frameworks of each DMCs. Therefore, can really look at digital specific policies and regulations, which again often cuts across different sectors and therefore requires a focused attention, if not a strong ownership to make those improvements happen. The next is infrastructure, from digital connectivity to computing power is the foundation of digital economy development. Therefore, is a strong focus of our sector office, and cybersecurity, which is critical in building trust in digital trade. On the accelerator side, I think these are the work streams that will support DMCs to be able to participate better, if not take better advantage of the digital trade. And this includes emerging technologies such as AI, digital skills, skilling workforce, as well as improving educations, and digital government services, which would build foundations for digital payment, digital ID, and data exchange that could foster more innovations locally. But we're not starting from scratch, and I think that's the good news. ADB has been engaged in various policy interventions across different sectors, even before Digital Sector Office was established. And the IG will build on and work closely with all the other ADB teams to really build on and maximize the impact that we've had. And just to name a few, the private sector operation team support in digital standards by International Chambers of Commerce was mentioned. But that the same team also supports adoption of Aung San Charles model law on electronic transfer records, which is also critical in enabling digital trade. And our tax hub under public sector management and governance team, for example, also supports the MCs to adopt OECD's BEPS 2.0 that has implications on taxation of digital services. And our Office of General Counsel has a legal and policy reform project that has also supported capacity building in e-commerce law as well. And of course, the RDI team has a swath of research and that's ongoing, and that creates very important data points and insights for operations teams to refer to. Our RCI team has supported a digital strategy of various regional blocks, such as our parts support to regulatory roadmap, GMS team supporting the Digitalization Action Plan, as well as CAREC Digital Strategy 2030. So we have done a lot of work to support digital growth of digital trade. And not to mention different sector teams work to help digitalization of the trade within a country, from logistics to customs modernization to digital financial inclusion. But as Stephanie mentioned, bringing interoperability and coherence also applies to ADB's operations as well. And our team is very aware that there's an ongoing work, but we need to work together to make our future interventions impactful. So we will be referring to our digital transformation operational approach that's in the near final stage, upcoming RCI operational approach, to sort of be the blueprint on how we will support our DMCs in supporting digital trade and digital economy development, as well as our country-specific digital transformation assessment that's ongoing in small batches to make sure that our support is contextual and context-specific. So I'll stop here, but once again, thanks for having me and congratulations.
Thank you so much, Yoonee. I think I cannot summarize what you said because this is really extensive, but I'm really happy to hear, about all the good work and all the different areas ADB is supporting, and also the coordination that you bring among different teams, BSOD, Taxa, BRDI, or CIT. So I think it's excellent work, and I'm really happy that we can work together on that.
Thank you. So now moving to Amrita. Well, you are a national digital sector expert, and we wanted to have you in the panel to understand better also some of the implementation challenges. So our question to you is, what are the key areas where Nepal is struggling to advance its digital regulatory framework? And if maybe you could identify 3 immediate practical steps that could help improve in the short and the medium term for Nepal. Over to you.
Thank you. Namaste from Nepal. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity. And then I would like to congratulate the publication team as well as authors. So this publication is not just another additional publication. It's kind of like guidance for the country like ours, where we are struggling and then, trying to figure out what is the best option. So far. So yeah, talking about Nepal, like Nepal has made some really good progress in let's say rolling out some of the like national digital ID, though like still the struggle is there to look it at from like overarching, you know, DPI perspective. Like there is also Digital Nepal Framework 2.0, which is in the final draft stage. Like we had Digital Nepal Framework in like it was drafted 2018, but it didn't roll out. And now e-governance blueprint, and like, you know, there are some of the organic growth of the private sector as well. So from the perspective of fintech, like payment, and then the e-commerce, it boomed after the like post COVID. But when it comes to regulatory regulation for the digital economy integration, there are like really the challenges, and the challenges are not really new. Connecting the remarks of the Bruce earlier in this webinar, the situation of Nepal is also not different, you know. So digital regulation in Nepal is kind of like governed by multiple institutions. So in Nepal, ADB conducted a digital diagnostic, and one of the findings was also that like each of the institution has like partial responsibility and then limited coordination. So let's say ministry responsible for IT, commerce, finance, and like central bank often like operate in silo. That really create the delays and duplications as well, and sometimes it doesn't really give the unified directions, you know, like one institution come up with some regulations and others come as the hurdles in the path. So especially in the cross-cutting area like digital identity and governance and e-commerce, I mean, that's what we are facing now. We still lack the comprehensive data protection law. So there is no such rules for cross-border data flow, and there is the kind of like limited legal recognition of the digital signatory. And then as the context like ours, there is a weak consumer protection in digital services. So even like, you know, the foundation is kind of like linked to the trust. Private sector innovations are also restricted because of all these things. And talking about the third one, especially in terms of capacity, Nepal has like really new federal system. So if we really talk about the capacity, you know, at the all tier, like federal government, provincial government, and the local government, we see there is a limited capacity and readiness, especially when we talk about the cross-border, as well as when we talk about the local regional coordination and integration. It's not only one side, it's both on the institutional as well as the private sector level. There is a capacity gap, and then when we talk about our MSMEs, who make like most of the private sector here in Nepal, they struggle with the digital compliance and awareness of the global standards and readiness to engage in the cross-border trade. So there is kind of like when we talk about the digital services in 2022, there is kind of like, you know, the shares we saw is kind of 515 million US dollar kind of the revenue. But you know, due to this geopolitical situation, we are not certain about it, and at the same time, that is not really driven by the institutional kind of like the force. It is driven by some of the diaspora or like some of the youth who went to abroad for the study, and they came back, and then, you know, they started the businesses, and they're doing it on their own. So getting back to your question, especially what are the practical steps, I mean, that can be done on the context like ours, I think we really need a kind of this national digital economic coordination mechanism. Actually, it is proposed by the digital Nepal framework, but you know, we are yet to see the implementation side of it, and it's delayed. So we are optimistic, but at the same time, you know, we don't have a time as well, because things are moving so fast and AI in the scene. So it's not future, right? So it's like the present. So really thinking about this like whole situation and engaging in the regional digital economy agreement, and just to ensure the reforms are not fragmented. That's a kind of like one thing we can do as a practical step. Second would be, of course, like foundational legal and regulatory reform. Let's say data protection law should be in place, and then the legal framework for cross-border digital services and recognition of e-signature, trust services, and of course, like interoperability protocols are some of the things that has to be done. This legal of this can, of course, like boost the investors, and then when we talk about the global business, Nepal looks premature, or like when we talk with the private sector, they always complain about the compliance taking so long so that they can make the good businesses. So yeah, these are some of the points. And of course, the country like ours, maybe we might not be able to do everything at once, but maybe we have to do in the foundation things that really enable other aspects. And then maybe we can do some of the pilots or the sandboxes for the regulatory experimentation. These are a few things I'd like to mention here. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Amrita. Those are very important points, the foundational blocks in terms of legal and regulatory reform, and also this interaction you mentioned with some of the more dynamic startup innovation sectors that are now emerging in Nepal. So it's a very interesting case study. So thank you for sharing those points with us.
All right. So now that we heard from our 4 panelists, we are going to start the Q&A. I see that some questions are already posted in the chat. So we'll start with the first one. That is, why is cross-border digital payment or transfer of funds still expensive? And I'd like to direct that question to Martin, given the topic, the theme. Martin, would you have any insights or answer that question?
Absolutely. So payments have become a lot less expensive because of digital technology, and they get expensive especially when there's a need to convert to cash on either side. So a lot of the decrease in cost that we might see going forward would be if you can send a remittance, say, from the United States to somewhere in Asia, or from somewhere in Asia Pacific to somewhere else, without having to have someone go to a physical location, put cash in that location. You need to pay for rent for that location, you need to pay for security, you need to realize some of that cash is going to be lost or stolen at different points. At money laundering compliance is harder. So a lot of that in and out can be solved if you make it fully digital. That's one. A second is if you make the ability to access the rails that we call them, that payments run over, for example, the USD payment system, more accessible, then you can have more direct routes of sending the money from one place to another, because each step adds cost to that as well. And the more competition you have, because there's more access and more players playing it, that lowers the cost of these different payment corridors. So there's a lot of evidence that if you have a lot of competition between two different currencies corridors, the cost goes down quite substantially. Those are probably the main ways I would focus on it.
Thank you, Martin. I think that was very clear. I hope there is that the person who asked the question is satisfied.
Maybe we can move to the second question. There is a question on the profitability, and if I understand the question, the question is about how is it worth doing all these investments? We see that the infrastructure for digital payments, implementing digital standards might be costly, but how profitable or why we should do these investments? So perhaps, Amrita, if you don't mind, maybe sharing some thoughts on why these investments are important, or from the perspective of Nepal, how do you see it?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, so digital, if we really take this as a foundation layer, because we have seen digital really transforming the economy, just providing back some of the changes in the economy. And then when we talk about the rural versus the cities kind of dimension, so on such things like if the regulatory perspectives and then our readiness are there in the place, and I think some of the innovations will boom out. And then the country like ours, when we say our country is small, I think the narrative has to be changed, because we have to link our strength to the global economy, right? And then only, because if we really talk about Nepal, we are like a landlocked country. But the narrative now is different. We can say that we are borderless now because of the digital opportunities. We don't have like we can provide the digital services which is weightless, because we don't have like the seaport and all, right? So in this context, like really to see this as an opportunity, the country like ours, if we have the regulatory readiness in the place, and that will really give us the foundation layer where we can think of other things after that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amrita. I think it's clear, like basically, especially for landlocked economies, digital is providing new opportunities. We were wondering, Yoonee, do you have some insights also on that question, or you want to complement why ADB, as you said, is ramping up efforts in digital, but it might be costly. Is it really profitable for developing economies?
I think we have ample evidence from developing countries where the digital technologies has brought about disruptions in business models. And despite nature of digital technologies, the marginal cost of bringing the extra service, extra product is a lot cheaper. Therefore, whether you're sitting in a developing economies or in advanced economies, if you're able to understand the new business models, the new opportunities that have sprung up, I think the profitability will follow. The challenge is really those who bear the cost of digital infrastructure investment is different from those who are profiting. In countries like Nepal or in developing countries, those it's often the local telecommunications companies that pay for that bear the cost of connectivity, as well as government, and the businesses that have profited have sort of come on top. So there is a tension, but I think with any disruptions, there are meant to be a tension between a traditional and then a new players. But at this point of digitalization, investing in digital infrastructure and innovation, even for developing economies, is a necessity. I don't think it's a luxury anymore.
Okay, thank you so much, Yoonee. I think that's also very clear. I think there are ample evidence, and I think it's really important to invest in digital for these reasons. Now we have a last question, but I mean about post-economy digital. Sorry, it's moving. Post-economy digital to economic AI today and future. What upskills and upgrade personnel developing countries? So I understand that question more on okay, there are new new technologies, and it's particularly complicated like AI, and it requires probably different skills. And so I understand the question as what can we do to help developing countries to upgrade skills so that they can better handle these new technologies. I hope I understand the question properly. And I would like to ask these questions to Stephanie.
Thanks so much, Pramila. And it's a great question. I think there are sort of two aspects to this as well. The first is, how do everyday people in communities, business owners in the region actually utilize these new technologies like AI or generative AI well? But then secondly, there's also a really important issue around the flows of talent to actually sort of build new things with these emerging technologies. So how do we have enough skilled workers and sort of tech experts to actually build on the AI platforms that we're now seeing? And I should say that that's a real challenge, even in a developed economy like New Zealand, where I'm from. You know, we have this constant shortage of tech skills. But I think the question was probably looking more about how do everyday people, small business owners and so on in the region actually upskill. And again, there, I think, you know, it requires action on a lot of fronts. There's obviously a very significant sort of domestic capacity building effort that's needed, educating people about these new technologies, providing programs and other kinds of support to enable them to use them well and leverage the benefits. And I mean, I think there are enormous potential benefits in terms of efficiency, in terms of accessing sort of technologies and innovations and analytical sort of outputs that wouldn't be available without these new technologies. So there's a really important domestic capability building that's needed. But as well as that, to go back to the theme of my chapter, I think there's also a really rich and you know, sort of high potential opportunity through sort of international cooperation to build those skills. So there's no monopoly on understanding how to use the skills well. In fact, if you're able to gather the insights and the experiences and the educational and support programs from around the region, that's you know, enormously beneficial and efficient. And so some of these mechanisms that we can see in the region, whether through, for instance, ASEAN does a lot of work on sort of developing collective capacity. Some of these new digital economy agreements have got capacity building built into them. The WTO has got a really significant capacity building piece as well, a sort of fund to fund that. The World Bank's doing a lot in this space too. So I think there are really important opportunities through international institutions. And that's, of course, without even talking about the valuable work that the ADB is doing, that we've already heard about from Yoonee, Apex, another forum where there's a lot of, you know, sort of upskilling going on. So I think it's really important to be able to leverage all of that and to use the best of the region in building the capacity. And just to finish on a sort of last note, I guess to acknowledge the really valuable role of the private sector in this space. So a lot of the big tech companies actually offer really valuable sort of capacity building and learning and educational programs, and they're freely accessible. So I do encourage people to take a look at what's out there. And of course, as part of that, you know, the transparency to actually understand that through institutions like the ADB is vital as well. Let me leave it there, Pramila. I know we're nearly at time.
Thank you. Perhaps maybe one last question. There is a question on the economic impact of payments. Maybe if we can wrap up, Martin, could you tell us how you see the future of digital payments and in the current discussions and current developments, how do you see the next steps in terms of improving access and the quality of digital payments in Asia?
Yeah, well, I addressed CBDC in my paper. I think this might be a good time to introduce that briefly. And here, I think what's interesting is that there's been so much interest in this as a way to expand financial inclusion. And in fact, every central bank digital currency that's been launched so far has struggled to find anyone who wants to use it, even China, which put enormous amount of resources behind it. So I don't necessarily think that's what's going to revolutionize things. Instead, you see places like Brazil with Pix and India with UPI, which managed to create what are called fast payment systems, which allow, you don't have to have it be a liability of the central bank. I don't think regular people care about that, but that creates a government kind of initiative to link together the different players in the payment system and create a new kind of payment system, not based only on banks, but that expands access. And then people are able to pay each other much more directly. I think that is a major way that we can move forward. And generally, those payments are pretty inexpensive. And additionally, those faster payment systems can be interlinked between countries and allow pretty direct cross-border payments. So I'm pretty excited about that as a possibility. The main challenge there is if they're so cheap, nobody is really incentivized to actually sign up a lot of merchants onto these services. So you have to come up with a good economic model. but this could lower costs and make things a lot more efficient and competitive.
Thank you, Martin. And on that note, we have to close our seminar. So this has been an excellent discussion, and it's been a pleasure discussing with all the panelists and participants. So thank you very much for being part of this project. And before we close today, we would like to invite you also to join our next Asian Impact webinar on food insecurity, inflation, and government aid on developing Asia and the Pacific, which will take place on 29th of May at 2 p.m. Manila time. So please do check our Asian Impact webinar and our Chief Economist webpage for more updates. Thank you, everyone, and hope to see you very soon.